Let's get started. Well, hello, I'm Mel Hauser. I use she, they pronouns. I'm the executive director of All Brains Belong. Welcome to Brain Club. Let me share screen, get us oriented to our conversation. Lizzie, would you be able to take over letting folks in if more people
Yes.
are around? Excellent, thank you. All right, so today we'll be talking about neuro-inclusive culture. And ways of cueing safety when we are dysregulated, when the people in our lives are dysregulated. We're going to be able to watch a pre-recorded interview with one of my favorite people in the whole universe, Hannah Bloom, who is an occupational therapist. Before we get started, closed captioning is enabled. You just have to toggle it on if you'd like to use it. Depending on your version of Zoom, you might see the closed captioning live transcript icon. If not, look for the more ... and choose show subtitles. You can also do the same and choose hide subtitles if you want to turn them off. All right, so if you're new to Brain Club, as many of you are, welcome. So Brain Club is our weekly education program where we talk about neurodiversity and try to demonstrate All Brains Belong's approach to neuro-inclusive culture for purposes of shifting broader community awareness and also promoting new ways of thinking and being in the world. And the idea that then you go off into your lives and if helpful, try to apply some of the things that you've seen here. And that's how we change culture. We hope that this is a place you'll feel safe. We hope this is a place that you will experience as supportive, but this is not a support group. This is an education space, more of a classroom experience. I know it's called the Brain Club, but it's not like a social club. It's more like an educational learning classroom environment. So it's not for medical or mental health advice, not a support group, not the right place to make personal requests or address personalized needs or problem solving around. It's a place where we invite you to listen, to learn, to observe, and to think about how maybe what you're learning connects to your life. There is no one right way to participate at Brain Club. You can have your video on or off. Even if it's on, we don't expect anything of you. We certainly do not need you to sit still and look at the camera or anything like that. So feel free to walk or move or fidget or stim or eat or take breaks or anything else that needs doing. During discussions, you can communicate however you're most comfortable. You can use mouth words, you can type in the chat. And there's never any pressure to communicate. Observation is a completely valid form of participation. And in addition to affirming all aspects of identity, one of the key parts of, I think not just Brain Club, but all of our programs is we really think about the collective. This is a program really oriented around the collective. So we think about the group's needs, the collective needs. And so related to that, a few weeks ago, we launched a new format based on feedback from the community. We shifted to a 45-minute program. We had panelists who were requesting that the chat be turned off during the presentation. And we had a new format where we watched part of a video, we had discussion, we watched part of a video, we had discussion. And certainly there were some advantages of that, namely that the panelists felt comfortable. And also feedback from participants has been that having the chat off while the asynchronous panel was playing allowed really a focus on the content, because as much as sometimes we think that we are paying attention to both chat and the screen, sometimes it's really, really actually hard to be doing that, and it's really shifting back and forth, back and forth. And so many people have shared that chat off during the presentation, much like the way that you wouldn't necessarily have a conversation while the orchestra is playing or something like that. Of course, a challenge of that is that, it's kind of hard to remember your thoughts for the next 15 minutes before the part one of the panel stops. Or it's also actually kind of hard to turn the chat on and off. It's actually logistically hard to do that. And so what we'd like to try to do, we're going to do an experiment tonight. I think so much of what we do here at All Brains Belong is like kind of iterative experiments to try to kind of reimagine how people come together, both when you have existing relationships and when you don't. When we have a situation where the panelist is okay with the chat being open, the chat's going to remain open. But we ask that you use it intentionally, slowly, thoughtfully. Kind of the equivalent of if you were going to speak out loud with mouth words. For those of you who are new to Brain Club, this is like, you missed the backstory, but we had a situation this summer where the chat was out of hand, and our staff was like, our capacity was really exceeded by the volume of the chat and the pace of the chat, and it was a whole thing. So that's where we're like, we're going to take a break from chat and presentation at the same time. So we're going to experiment with the chat remaining open, but we invite you to, again, please use it intentionally, and whatever needs doing to allow the main event to be the interview. Certainly, of course, if things get out of hand, we'll let you know if we have to shut the chat down again during presentation, but we'll see how it goes. So thank you for being part of this. If it's your first time at Brain Club, it's okay to not understand what's happening. We just invite you to keep coming back. It might take, so many people here tonight, they've been coming for 3 years. So it might take several passes. So we just, feel free to just sit back, observe, check it out. We have our community has put together a frequently asked questions document that covers a lot of the logistics. And Lizzie has put that link in the chat. And thank you to everyone who participated in writing that frequently asked questions document. Okay. One more thing before we begin. It's the new month next week. If you're new to Brain Club, every month we have a new theme. So December's theme is Brain Club Greatest Hits. That's where we revisit some of the key themes from past Brain Clubs from the past year. And Lizzie's put the registration for December Brain Club in the chat. And if you're registered for tonight, you'll get an email with that link as well. With the idea that, if you cover a topic, January, February, and now here it is in December, maybe that topic means something differently to you now that you've had multiple passes at it and a whole year's worth of life experiences to, reflect upon. So that's why every year we do this in December. So we look forward to revisiting some of these topics with you. Okay, now we're ready. So our topic, neuro-inclusive culture. There are lots of patterns, common factors, common stressors in relationship challenges for neurodivergent folks. And you will hear about some of these tonight in this conversation, but it's the idea of nervous system to nervous system. How do we cue safety interpersonally? And so we are going to watch an old Brain Club. We're rewinding 2 years ago for a conversation with Hannah Bloom, who is one of my favorite people in the universe. Hannah is a pediatric occupational therapist. She was our founding board chair and now a member of our professional advisory board. And so again, we're going to leave the chat open. We'll pace ourselves. As we watch this conversation. This interview will run 30 minutes, and then we'll have time for discussion to follow. Thank you, Liz. Thank you for that comment. Liz says, I wish more spaces took the same care to lay out the thinking and iterating and improving that Brain Club does. Yeah, right. Thank you for naming that. And I think it's really our community, like our community moderators who spend a lot of time thinking and talking about these things to like set up these guardrails. So this is actually an experience that feels good. And, it's try stuff, try more stuff. All right, here is our interview. And we actually, at the beginning of this video, what Hannah and I did before we played the interview is we covered like some basics of nervous system regulation that I think like we wanted to include again so that we have a shared vocabulary as you listen to Hannah's interview. Share sound. Here we go. Probably louder.
Because when we think about inclusion, it all begins with safety and regulation. or lack thereof, right? So that's where we begin. So in January, actually, we had a whole month-long theme called "Help! Everyone in my home is flipping their legs," all about co-regulation and self-regulation. I want to leave time for lots of conversation today, so I'm not going to play this video clip because we got off to such a late start. Sorry about that. But everyone flips their lid, and that happens because when things in our environment trigger our limbic system, and using the analogy from The Whole Brain Child by Dr. Dan Siegel and Dr. Tina Payne-Bryson of upstairs brain and downstairs brain, when downstairs brain is triggered, and we don't get to pick when that happens, it's because we're not feeling safe. And when downstairs brain is triggered, we don't have full access anyway to upstairs brain. And so we don't get to necessarily make choices. Downstairs brain calls the shots most of the time. And so that can take many different forms. If someone is overtly like throwing things and screaming, you might be able to detect that they're dysregulated. But dysregulation can take many other forms. And sometimes it's even hard to know when someone's dysregulated, or even to recognize when we ourselves are dysregulated. So All Brains Belong, in addition to being governed by our board of directors, we have a community advisory board. And so this spring, we asked, hey, how are we going to know when our community is more neuro-inclusive? And this is what they said. I'm not going to invite you to study this right now. It's up on the website. It's one of my favorite things. But I'm just going to show you that so many people in our community, this comes down to access needs, being able to communicate access needs, explore access needs, negotiate conflicting access needs, that is one of the ways that we're going to define our impact. And that's why for this summer, all we've done pretty much is talk about access needs. And if you've not been to a brain club in the last couple of months to hear us talking about this, access needs are anything that is required to meaningfully participate in life. And everyone has access needs. They may just not think about it that way, but when framed that way, it really can explain a lot of things. And often we have conflicting access needs. And the example I always like to give in my house is like when Luna, my 5-year-old, needs to make noise at the top of her lungs at the exact same time that I need complete quiet. Yeah, that's conflicting access needs. And why this matters to today's conversation is that often we are in co-dysregulation encounters and we may not even know it. And if we do, we may not realize that a lot of co-dysregulation, meaning rather than co-regulation, like we are returning to calm together, we are doing the opposite together, escalating, co-escalating, relates to conflicting access needs, where we two or more people have things that are required for them to meaningfully participate. And of course, brain rules are an example of cognitive access needs. So go back and watch January and February, because there's a lot of gems in old brain clubs about the co-regulation versus dysregulation experience. But that is just a recap to get us all on the same page for my conversation with Hannah Bloom. And I'm going to, actually I have to stop share so that I can reshare with sound, because I always forget to do that. We were talking yesterday about how a lot of people think that there's like a set of things to do, and that's going to make their family environments and their relationships feel better. Like that there would be like some strategies top down, but that doesn't really play out.
Right. Yeah, that there's some prescription of how to exist that creates this end goal.
Right. Right.
Doesn't exist.
It does not exist.
Yeah.
And I think that I know as a parent, just as a human, like I am so rarely regulated. And when I am regulated or when I am distracted enough, like I'll give you an example. Okay, so typically when it's time to leave the house, I'm like, Luna, I want you to leave the house. Let's go leave the house. Luna's limbic system's like, yeah,
No.
it's not right. Like, no. And it's not volitional. It's automatic, involuntary. It is not safe when someone is inducing me to comply.
Right.
And this week, when it was time to leave, I was on the phone with my colleague and I opened the door and I was like, Luna, I'm going to be leaving for the thing. I thought you might want to get dressed.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went back to the phone call and my energy was like not directed at her.
Right.
And she was like, bring me my clothes. So I grabbed the clothes, I put them in and I said, and she's like watching a screen and I was like, you might want to put them on. And then I was like distracted again, back to the call. And then 10 minutes later, I go back in, dressed. She's freaking dressed. This has never happened in the history of my life.
Yep. Yeah. So you removed any time constraint because it wasn't, I'm leaving. Are you coming? We're going. I'm leaving, which is like time constraint now. This is happening. And you removed pressure of your presence and energy by being in a different mental space, right?
Right. And the time thing was not actually removed. I talked about time. I knew about time kind of, although I don't really experience time. So like energetically, time was not part of my mental space. It was more so the latter. It was more so like my energy was diffused by paying attention to something else. And that contributed to us. I think it contributed to a sense of safety.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and a sense of safety in a removal of not being able to meet an expectation.
Yes.
Yeah. So the fear or the fight or the limbic response to an expectation being put, am I going to be able to meet this expectation? I don't know. So maybe I'm going to say no right away. I don't want to meet your expectations, so I'm going to say no right away. I don't understand.
Yeah, I'm not. Your expectations feel unsafe to me.
Yeah.
So I shut them down because that's what my little limbic system is supposed to do. Unsafe. I actually did not have expectations. I didn't have enough cortex to have expectations.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So sometimes we remove expectation of transition by adding like a speaker story, and then the speaker travels with you. So like there's an audio, a podcast or an audiobook that we're listening to, and it just kind of gets turned on. And this is like, then I'm helping Isaac get dressed and I'm right there with him and we're listening. And then the speakers just move into the car and we're going to follow it because that's what we want, is the story.
That's amazing. And it's not like a gimmick. It's like the lens. It's almost like reframing the lens. Like if the primary goal is to do the thing, it will fail because it will feel unsafe.
Yeah.
The primary goal is a safe experience.
Is a safe experience. And the primary goal is an on-time arrival for my need. So I know my need, but limbically, I can maintain a calm in relationship. So I know my need of getting somewhere by a certain time. So I can rewind that by 2 hours because this is how my brain works. And I can know that, okay, it's going to take this amount of time to do these things. And what are the tools or what's the safety net that's going to allow this to happen so that I'm not late, which is when my limbic kicks in and I get stressed. But I give like a huge amount of time to be able to get to that point. And it's removing for Isaac, it's removing a list of must-dos before a final external unsafe expectation. You getting to work is not, me getting to work on time is not a need of his. So I don't even put that on the schedule sometimes, right?
So you're also talking about framing this as an access need issue. So your access need is to arrive on time. It doesn't matter whether it's rational or irrational. It could very well be a brain rule and not a world rule, but it is your brain rule and it is serving you. And so you are keeping it. And so the way that you have negotiated conflicting access needs is to plan your day with this 2-hour lead up so that your energy. So it's just about like planning your life around basically it's planning your life around being regulated.
Yep. Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So that must mean that it's not just about blocking out 2 hours. Like you're essentially building your life around being regulated. That sounds like a good idea. How do you do that?
Yeah. How do you do that? A lot of tools. I mean, a lot of access needs, a lot of accommodations that fit, that are forever changing, because sometimes what works one week isn't what works today, but that's okay. You're roll with it and flexible. So that using a story, using a cognitive engagement for Isaac gives him safety that allows his nervous system to continue to do the mundane: brush my teeth, put my socks on, walk to the car, buckle my seatbelt. Like those are all tedious tasks to his nervous system. So a cognitive engagement that's enjoyable gives him more access to that hard stuff. It's the threshold piece. How many stressful pieces of my day can I do without it all adding up into full system stress?
Yes. That is making me think about cognitive regulation, because just as you're saying that Isaac's cortex is engaged with the story and following along it, that reminds me of Luna today when we were leaving for school. Luna entered character. Luna was the ground critter, and everything we did was about the ground critter doing the thing. That made it more accessible because Luna was using her cortical strategies to make her feel more safe. And so by interacting with ground critter, it actually like shifted my expectation, because I'm like, we're in a mode where she's crawling on the floor and rolling around in the dirt, and it's 7:50 a.m. and it's 36 degrees and we're rolling around in the dirt, and like, I'm going to engage in that. I'm going to cortically enter that space, and like it made me shift out of expectation, because part of me was like, all right, I'm with the ground critter. We may be late to school because I am in this different space now. Yeah. And because I'm using, and we all have different self-regulation strategies. One of mine is the mantra of safety and connection is primary. And so there is arriving 10 minutes earlier to school is not actually going to be worth it to me. Even my cortex, when I like do risk benefit calculations, anything that can come from my being like, we got to do the thing, it's never worth it because of that cortical strategy of like, regulation and safety, connection and safety is primary.
Yep. Yeah. Your one brain, the human brain, will not have expansive access, won't be able to engage, to learn, to have partnership if it's all right, if it's all in sympathetic fight, flight, freeze, flop mode. And the way to keep that cortical is connection and safety. And so you use that cortical top-down method to achieve your state of regulation and be present in the environment and the emotional and neuroceptive energetic energy that's right there and available. And in that, you access a different level of connection and regulation and togetherness, right?
Yes. So we've had the experience of being around a small group of kids with hypersensitive neuroception threat detection systems. And this has gone really well. What do you think has made it go well? And by go well, I mean the kids feel safe and want to come back.
Yeah. What do I think's made it smooth or accessible?
Yeah. Other than you being there, because like you are a magical human.
We are, not only have we had the privilege of being with kids with heightened neuroception, but we have a group of adults with them, caregivers, parents, loved ones who are very neuroceptive and aware of energy. And I think setting us all up as a group of big people in trust and connection, and going on 3 years of connection and collaboration, building that as a safe place. These little humans are walking into what is already very accepting and open and valued space. So I think the energy for sure in that space is huge. You help me regulate, I help you regulate. The other big people in the space equally help all of us regulate. Leah and I had the conversation when we first started working together. Leah is another one of the big people in this space, for her to understand my nervous system. When I start to get really flighty and kind of hyper and like I have a lot of things to say and I may be like running all over the place, please, Leah, just give me this down here, Hannah. And she is so solid, and she is so much that grounding force. Like, even just working with her for the last 3 weeks, I've been able to be like, all right, I can get hyper and I can get flighty, and that's a part of who I am. And that's a part of, I will play tag and run in circles because that's great for my nervous system. And then when I sit down and I get a drink of water and I feel Leah's energy, I'm like, and I'm back here. And this is a good solid space for me to be observant and be a draw to the nervous systems that are still really high energy.
Yes. The other thing that you do and that Leah does, and that I work hard to cortically get myself to follow your lead on this, is that I don't have an expectation of what play looks like in that space. Right. And energetically, these sweet little limbic systems, they feel not just energy and angst, but they feel expectation. They know when someone is expecting them to do the thing. This like invisible external demand to fit in or like otherwise do the thing.
Yeah.
Because of who we all are, we actually like don't expect them to do the thing, and they don't expect each other to do the thing.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And that's a lot of rewiring social construct in our own neurology, our own narrative of what the world is. It's definitely a new space of being the therapist, being the occupational therapist on the team. Like, I'm not showing up with my agenda and my whiteboard and all my systems of, we're going to do a regulating sensory piece, and then we're going to do a social exchange piece, and then we're going to do a regulating sensory piece. Like, I had a whole formula 10 years ago that I was stuck, that was a brain rule. And to liberate that from my expectations gives this authentic engagement space for the little people that I'm working with that can come into connection and engagement and self-actualization in the path that fits their nervous system and their brain, not that fits our socialized expectation of, when you graduate from therapy, you will have learned, right? So that's been it's just been unlearning brain rules, but it's also been noticing where the good stuff is, noticing where the joy is and where the really sweet connections are, and where those little places of, like, just, you feel it. You're like, oh, this is it. This is worth holding on to. I want more of this. And noticing those times that came up, they of course were always when the child or the student, when my child felt the safest, right? And so they would come into that as looking for acceptance, connection, who I am, I'm showing up as me, totally different. And it was never in any prescription. It was never in anything that I would show up and be like, and at this point we will have self-actualized, connection.
I wonder if many people, because of their lived experience of feeling unsafe by the social constructs in their own lives, that limbic response, even in remembering, because trauma stays in your body, right? So like, you enter a space like a play group, and your kid does a thing, and energetically, whether real or imagined, the energy of, like, there's gonna be judgment on my kid, judgment on me, and like, even though nothing happened, the energy that goes out into, ooh, unsafe, then they feel that energy of, like, ooh, unsafe, and then chaos. What do you do in that moment to be to return to a place of, I'm gonna let go of that?
How do you, so I, like, for me, and this is the practice. And so, I mean, this is also the good question about what it means for the family too. So for me in the family, the way that I return to regulation, the way that I bring my nervous system back into reading other people's attunement, reading other people's nervous system, instead of being overwhelmed by my own, whatever it is going on. The best way for me to do that is to get down on the ground. Again, this is me, and this is experiments of years of knowing how to attune. For me, it's squatting down close. It's putting both my hands on the ground for a second, the floor. So I squat and I'm low. There's something about the proprioceptive work. Like, I think because my glutes kick in so much, I'm like, oh, here's my body. And because I get into flexion, I'm like, oh, here I am. This is my contained little nervous system. Putting my hands on the ground feels strong. I feel like, yep, I am strong. I am a strong person. I can do this. So I'm building from the sensory system back into regulation. And I've practiced it enough over the years that I can do it fairly quickly in my nervous system. Those cues kick in safety for my neuroception. And it's subconscious. It is something our brains are always doing all the time. Scanning the environment, scanning the interrelationships, scanning the internal relationship, the internal environment for safety. And we are geared for it. So once we feel it, once we find it, it's what our system wants to go to. That homeostasis is where we want to be cellularly, right?
Yes.
Okay. So for my nervous system, it's that. It's getting low, it's getting grounded. It's softening my face, like actively saying, let your eyes soften. Don't create some expected emotion. So that like that shame, fear response might create this expected like, oh, I'm okay, right? Like everything's fine. Can you tell this isn't really a smile? Like, but it's what we do because it's what we've been socialized to do. So actively neutralizing, softening my face. And then like something about the environment for me usually helps. Find the horizon, look at a tree root, some sort of cue to me that's like, there's no saber-toothed tiger here. There's no gaping hole that's going to suck you into the hot molten lava of the middle of the earth. This is solid ground.
So you're describing that you begin with a bottom-up strategy. You get into your body and you ground yourself, whatever that means to you. You ground yourself, and then you have access to your cortex where you are cortically mediating your limbic response, because now you have access to your cortex because you did that initial bottom-up. Yep. Softening to take the edge off, to like bring your cortex back online, and then you go to that. I think a lot of people skip right to that, or they try to skip right to that, and they don't have access to their cortex, and you can't skip it. You have to do something to access your cortex. Yep. And there's an element of like when you're in the thick of it, even if you're like already screaming and like actively flipping your lid, you don't have access to the impulse control to stop. You may not even be able to like metacognitively like zoom out and watch yourself. You just don't have access to that. So it's really just like, it's happening, get to the ground, if that's how you ground, like something in your body.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, and it's experimental for a while. It's trial and error to figure out what your physical somatosensory system responds to. And then once that's a cue of safety for your physical sensory being, it grows, it gets stronger. And sometimes maybe it needs tweaking, like, when my knees can't squat anymore, and hopefully not for another 20 years, I'll have to figure something else out.
Right. The other thing is that if someone knows that their go-to self-reg plan is a top-down, trying to use their cortex.
Yep.
One thing that I've found helpful is to prepare ahead of time what I'm wanting my cortex to do.
Yep.
Because if I can like ideate and motor plan it ahead of time, I can maybe access it as like an automatic loop I can pull in, as opposed to trying to use it in the moment. Because then it becomes not a stop, impulse control stop. It's like, don't like foot's on the gas already. Don't try to step on the brake of stop screaming at your kid. It's, I'm going to go to my automatic loop. And so for me, that is like the like I said before, the mantra of like the relationship is primary, like whatever that, like a thought I can try, even if I don't have full access to my cortex, that I can try that. I mean, it doesn't work maybe, but like it might work a lot better than like, I'm going to talk myself out of how this is okay.
Right. Well, I mean, and this is also gets to some of the cores of like, there's unnumberable amounts of different brains. You think, when we've talked about this, you think in specific word patterns, always. Your directions are in go left at and 2 stoplights, then so your brain does everything in that language space. And I do not. I do pictures, and I know which rock is at the driveway that I want to drive into, not where it is on the street in words ways. So I think that's also just a self-awareness piece of what works for your brain, and language works for yours.
I feel so seen right now.
So I think some of the themes that we heard about, and I'm going to give us a visual support of some of the things that Hannah talked about. We heard about grounding, self-regulation, connection. Heard a lot about energy, awareness, like so many of these things that are all, this might be, if this is new for you, again, keep coming back with multiple passes at some of these things, because they all interrelate. And it really comes down to the level of the nervous system. What are the things that cue safety for your nervous system, let alone cueing safety to other people's nervous systems? I wonder, as we wrap up today, I'd love to hear from some folks either in the chat or out loud. Some of the things that you heard today, that you'll take with you. You think maybe you'll take away from the conversation that into your own life.
I just
Should I
jump in.
dive in? Go for it.
Well, we'll say Emily and then Hannah.
Oh, I was gonna say this. Thank you so much, because this sort of described what I've been experiencing in my household. So more like I've been a bystander in this experience. This happens, yes, the conflicts that arise between the other two family members. I've been trying to reflect back to them what I see, but yeah, you two nailed it. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And like, there's so much, right? So even when you watch 2 other people have conflicting access needs and be in code dysregulation, when I observe that in my house, it does not cue safety to the other members of my household for me to share my observations. That does not help, even though like I see it and it's there and so yes. Thank you, Emily. Thank you for sharing. Hannah.
I just want to say that it's a lot. Like there's a lot of information that was there. And I also feel like there was a lot of, yeah, I feel like I want to like go back and listen again. And I think there's sort of like some aha moments that are kind of like they're sort of popping out here a little bit. And so I think for me, like I'm sort of just like, I'm not sure what to say except like, holy cow, I think that there's some things I can glean from there. And I appreciate the conversation that you and Hannah had.
Thank you, Hannah. I just got chills, right? Like the idea of like all of the resources out there in the universe, like to actually find something of like, I don't know what it is yet, but like there's something here that I need to process later, and like, awesome, so awesome. So we can maybe Lizzie, if you can give people a head start, if you can find the link to the original, what that was from, which was in October 2022, we can put that in the chat right now. People can go watch it now if they want. Otherwise, the recording from this brain club will go out next week. I'm gonna read some reflections in the chat before we wrap up. Luna says, I learned about the downstairs brain, upstairs brain concept, and we'll read more about that. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, so that came from a book, The Whole Brain Child. And so, like, even as a doctor, that's literally the way that I think about it. It's just like, oh, those are completely separate parts of the brain. The idea that when the limbic system is triggered, my skills of the thinking part of my brain, they don't work. What? They left that out in medical school. Like, but that's actually a truth of the nervous system. Emily sharing, don't try to go directly to upstairs brain solutions when you're still in downstairs brain mode. Oh, absolutely, because they don't work. Yes. Steve sharing, there's a new way of thinking here about thinking, built around the technical concepts like the limbic system. Totally, right? Like and again, the like metacognitive thinking about thinking, that's a task of the cortex of upstairs brain. And so in the moment when you're dysregulated, you may not have access to be doing those higher order reflections. It's like, I survive this moment, and then later when I'm feeling better, then maybe I can think about my thinking. Lizzie saying, I really like the idea of using nature to get regulated. I haven't tried that before. I want to try it. Cool. We were saying, I'm going to sit on the ground the next time I feel dysregulated. I love that. Yeah, I this interview, I don't think I'd ever heard Hannah say that before. And I think about her saying it in this interview, like, I mean, every day, literally every day, sometimes multiple times a day. Like, no, that would literally never occur to me to sit on the ground while I'm dysregulated. Not only when I am in conflict, usually with my 7-year-old, by my sitting on the ground, it also influences the power dynamic. I almost said I'm the tall adult. I'm 4'11". No one has ever described me as a tall adult, but I am taller than my child. And so me sitting on the ground, is cue safety in many ways, but it also like grounds me so that energetically I am less angsty and dysregulated, which also cues safety. And I got a private chat message, someone sharing that they've sat on the ground when visiting with people. Yes, intuitively grounding, absolutely. And comments about the Leva saying the intensity of caregiver focus, right? And it's like, you can't decide. I can't decide as a caregiver that I'm not going to focus on you, because I don't care about you less. I care about you just as much as, if not more than 5 seconds ago. But that may not feel safe to that other nervous system. Sometimes people talk about the expression of like it feeling uncomfortable to be perceived. I haven't like processed that statement enough to really understand it, but people talk about it a lot. And I think, and many people experience that. And I think that another way of saying that is when someone's paying too close attention to me, that doesn't feel safe. Okay, well, thank you. Thank you all so much for being part of this conversation. And this is going to build really nicely to next week. We're going to be revisiting as we start our 2024 Brain Club Greatest Hits, if you will. We're going to be taking a look at shame and internalized ableism and identity formation. And we're going to be revisiting, it's a panel from earlier this spring, including with many of you participated on, to hear about the impact of the way that neuronormative society has a direct impact on the narratives that someone experiences over the course of their lifetime. And so you may be in a situation and you find yourself dysregulated, you don't quite understand why. And the topics that come up in next week's community panel, I think, may shed a little bit more light into those moments, because often things come up that remind us of all of these experiences over the course of a lifetime that have led to internalized ableism and shame. And in many ways, that is, I think, one of the most powerful things we do here at Brain Club is shining a light on shame and letting people know that you're not alone. It's not just you. It never was just you. And when you hear stories reflected back to you when someone else tells them, there's something that like is indescribable about that for someone who's thought that they were the only ones. So with that, I hope you'll join us next Tuesday. I hope you have a good week. Bye, everybody.